Who killed the princes in the Tower? It's one of history's greatest cold cases, a mystery that has puzzled historians for over 500 years. Were the two young princes, Edward V and his brother Richard, murdered by their ambitious uncle, Richard III? Richard murdered by their ambitious uncle, Richard III? Or was there another player in the shadows, a powerful woman with everything to gain? Let's dive into the murky politics of 15th century England and investigate the two prime suspects. First, let's set the scene. It's 1483. King Edward IV has just died, leaving his 12-year-old son, Edward V, as the heir to the throne. The young king and his 9-year-old brother, Richard, Duke of York, are placed in the Tower of London, which back then was both a royal residence and a state prison. Their uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, is named Lord Protector, tasked with ruling until the young king comes of age. But then everything changes. Richard of Gloucester makes a shocking move. He declares his nephews illegitimate. How? By claiming his late brother, King Edward IV, had been pre-contracted to marry another woman before he married the princess's mother, Elizabeth Woodville. In the 15th century, a pre-contract was as binding as a marriage. This meant Edward IV's marriage was invalid, and their children had no claim to the throne. With the princes out of the way, Richard, as the next legitimate heir, becomes King Richard III. Shortly after this, the two boys, who were seen playing in the gardens of the Tower, vanish. They were never seen again. The natural assumption, both then and now, is that Richard III had them killed. After all, he had the most obvious motive. As long as the princes were alive, they were a threat to his reign. Supporters of the House of York could rally around them and try to restore them to the throne. Getting rid of them would secure his position. This is the traditional story, immortalized by Shakespeare, painting Richard III as a monstrous, power-hungry villain. The evidence against Richard seems strong. He controlled the Tower of London, so no one could have gotten to the princes without his knowledge or consent. He had the motive, the means, and the opportunity. His contemporaries certainly believed he was guilty. Sir Thomas More, writing a few decades later, penned a dramatic account claiming Richard hired two assassins, Miles Forrest and John Dighton, to smother the boys with their pillows. While More's account is vivid, it's worth noting he was writing under the Second Tudor dynasty, the very family that defeated Richard III. So his work could be seen as political propaganda, designed to make the Tudors look good by blackening Richard's name. But is the case against Richard III a slam dunk? Not necessarily. Let's dive into the gaps in this theory. If Richard did order their deaths, why was he so secretive about it? He had already publicly declared them illegitimate. Some argue that he could have produced the bodies and claimed they died of natural causes, like a sudden illness. This would have quashed any rumors and prevented anyone from trying to impersonate the princes later on, which actually happened. The secrecy surrounding their disappearance is strange if Richard was the killer. It left the door open for rebellion and uncertainty, the very things he supposedly wanted to avoid. Also, Richard III's reign was short and troubled. He only ruled for 2 years before he was defeated and killed at the Battle of Bosworth Field by Henry Tudor. Maybe he didn't have time to consolidate his power properly. Perhaps he kept the boys alive as a bargaining chip, or maybe he sent them away to live in secret. There are theories that the boys were smuggled out of the tower and lived out their lives in obscurity. It's a compelling thought, but there's no concrete evidence to support it. This brings us to our second suspect, a character often overlooked in the traditional narrative, Lady Margaret Beaufort. Who was she? Margaret Beaufort was the mother of Henry Tudor, the man who would eventually become King Henry VII. She was a descendant of the House of Lancaster, the rivals to the House of York. From the moment her son was born, Margaret dedicated her life to one single goal, putting him on the English throne. She was incredibly pious, intelligent, and politically ruthless. So what was her motive for wanting the princes dead? It's all about the line of succession. As long as Edward V and his brother were alive, they stood ahead of her son, Henry Tudor, in the claim to the throne. Even if they were declared illegitimate, their very existence was an obstacle. With the princes gone, the anti-Ricardian faction needed a new candidate to rally behind. Who better than Henry Tudor, the leading Lancastrian claimant? The disappearance of the princes directly paved the way for her son's rise to power. Let's look at the timeline. The princes disappeared in the summer of 1483. By autumn of that same year, Margaret Beaufort was already plotting with Elizabeth Woodville, the prince's own mother, to overthrow Richard III and marry Henry Tudor to the prince's older sister, Elizabeth of York. This alliance was crucial. It would unite the warring houses of Lancaster and York, strengthening Henry's claim immensely. But here is the most puzzling part. Why would Elizabeth Woodville agree to support Henry Tudor if she believed Richard III had killed her sons? It seems incredibly odd, unless perhaps she knew Richard wasn't the killer. What if she suspected or even knew that Margaret Beaufort was behind it? Or what if Margaret convinced her that Richard was the culprit and aligning with Henry was the only way to get revenge? The psychology here is complex. Elizabeth was in a desperate situation. Her sons were gone and her family's power was destroyed. An alliance with the Tudors might have been her only path back to influence. The argument for Margaret's guilt is circumstantial but compelling. She had a powerful motive, arguably as strong as Richard's. She was known for her political scheming and had agents and allies everywhere. While she didn't control the tower, it is not impossible that she could have bribed a guard or found a way to get to the children. Some historians suggest that the disappearance of the princes served Henry Tudor's cause far more than it served Richard III's. For Richard, it was a constant source of scandal and instability. For Henry, it was the key that unlocked the door to the throne. So, who did it? Richard III, the classic villain, who had the means and opportunity? Or Margaret Beaufort, the ambitious mother, who had the most to gain in the long run? The truth is, we may never know for sure. No bodies were definitively identified until 1674, when two small skeletons were found buried beneath a staircase in the Tower of London. They were presumed to be the princes and were interred in Westminster Abbey by order of King Charles II. But even then, modern DNA testing on these remains has been blocked, so we can't be 100% certain they are the princes. The case remains open. Was it the calculating uncle, desperate to hold on to his crown? Or the fiercely determined mother, paving the way for her son's dynasty? The story of the princes in the Tower is a perfect example of how history is often written by the victors. The Tudors won, so their version of events, with Richard as the villain, became the accepted truth for centuries. But when you look closer, the picture becomes much more complicated. What do you think? Who do you believe is the more likely culprit in this 500-year-old mystery? I'd love to hear your theories in the comments below. It's a fascinating debate that shows how the past is never really past. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into history's greatest mysteries. See you next time.